The Vietnam War will always be embedded in our nation's history. It was a time of confusion, domination, and opposition. The world, as it stood, was divided. The communists on one side and the capitalists on the other. The year was 1965. The U.S. entered Vietnam in order to stop the spread of communism. In a matter of months, Americans were opposing and rallying. Overseas, men were risking lives. Donald J. O'Brien, a combat medic of the 2nd Battalion, 1st Infantry, 196th Light Infantry Brigade, who served in the Army between December 16, 1965 and December 15, 1967, stationed in Vietnam for exactly 11 months and 11 days, took part in Operation Attleboro, Operation Junction City, and Operation Cedar Falls.
What were some important battles or events you were part of?
Um, well, the three major battles, Operation Attleboro, then Operation Cedar Falls, and Operation Junction City. Operation Attleboro was the first one I was in, and I seem to recall we went out, we started somewhere about mid-September 1966, and the operation was finally over into November, it's 1966. But my involvement ended probably about November 10th, 1966. November 3rd, 4th, and 5th was the worst. On November 3rd, the 2nd platoon was ambushed and 10 were killed. By the end of the day, we had 10 killed and another 8 evacuated between wounds and heat stroke. On November 4th, we were told to move up and join up with a company, the 25th Division. A company from the 25th Division got separated. They got trapped behind inside the Vietnamese regimental base camp. And so we had to hold the line until they could get them out. And we stayed there for 36 hours until they were able to get them out. And during that 36 hours, we would keep sending units through to try to break through the lines to get to them. And many of them were killed. And the NBA would try to break through our line with human wing attacks. And we repulsed them. The infantry soldiers repulsed them. I spent the whole night in the aid station because I had evacuated 3 men. And it was the blackest night of your life. In Cedar Falls, we were given what was known as a blocking position. They had a number of units stand, say, semi-permanent base accompanying out here. But at night, we would send out ambush patrols, and Cedar Falls was in what was known as the Iron Triangle. It was an area just north of Kochi, which was where the 25th Division had their base camp, which we found out years later, just a tunnel complex underneath their base camp. They didn't build it there. It was there before we got there. We built our camp on top of theirs. And it was a stronghold for the NVA. So I started at one end and pushed through, sweeping the area. They were trying to push it into us. And so we were supposed to try to capture them there. And the spot that we had, there was 2 or 3 nights in a row, our guys executed some ambushes and killed a few. But I don't remember any large numbers. And then in Junction City was an operation by the Cambodian border, which was we were trying to, I believe what we were trying to do was disturb what's known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the supplies coming in. Because like in Operation Attleboro, were kind of really messed up their plans for, I think, 10 of 67. They were planning something, so that threw that off. And so we were kind of keeping them off guard.
And the weather conditions, you were talking about them, were they really hard to deal with?
Actually, they were kind of least of your worries. But when it would rain, it would come down so hard, so intense. You could literally soap up and rinse off. It could come down that hard. You could actually take a shower outside. The problem with that is that it would stop as fast as it started. Like I said, turn off the water faucet. So that when it got to the dry season, there was almost no rain. So it was very hot and humid. But when you're 19 and 20, you can tolerate that much better. And everybody you know around you is there too, so what are you going to complain to? It's hot. It's, just become accustomed to it. When we were in base camp, which usually was about 1 week a month, I had a cot inside a tent. I got a picture of it here. That was my tent. And they were like this here. The bunk with the mosquito netting above it. And that was my particular bed. Just a bed with an air mattress on it. When we were out in the field, that's where we slept, right there on the ground.
And did you ever feel homesick? Or was it hard for you to be away from your family and friends?
Yeah, I really didn't want to be there for a while. But for me, because well, in order to survive out there, basically, my goal was to live through the day. So I didn't so much look at, oh gee, I got 364 more days. I didn't count down. I didn't want to count down. It was like a superstition. When you start getting short, you get careless, and that's when you get killed. And because up until then, I've been lucky.
And you visited the orphanages. What exactly did you do there?
Well, the doctor came with us. We went with the doctor. How are we going to put it? And they would examine all the children. And after he would examine them, he would give a diagnosis and tell them what they needed. Maybe they needed a dose of tetracycline, or if they had a sore that needed to be cleansed, or that. The medics would go. That's what we would do. Try to help them. It's me and all my kids. That was right outside the orphanage. Tainen, I can't remember. It's that big religious. I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a cross between Buddha and Christianity. It's not a good picture, but that was the doctor, and that woman was one of the caretakers of the kids. It's there. I realize most of those little kids now are like 44 years old.
When you came home, how were you received by your friends and family?
Very well.
How about the public?
I didn't deal with the public.
Mm.
I isolated.
So the negative opinion had no effect on you when you came home?
I thought it didn't, but it did. So I didn't want to talk about Vietnam for over 30 years. If somebody would ask me questions or if they see the medals on my wall, I wouldn't tell them anything about it.
Do you feel that time has helped you heal in any way? Or is it
It's
just...
helping.
And did you ever think about going back to Vietnam and visiting?
I've thought about it many times. I don't know if I will or not, but I have a great curiosity to go back. Matter of fact, within the last month, I met a man who lives in Michigan, and he does tours where he's been back like 9 times. And I had mentioned to him that I had been in Tay Ninh and what was known as Mui Bao Dem, this Black Virgin Mountain, which was outside our base camp. And it was scared the hell out of me. There was a special forces camp on the top, but the rest of the mountain was loaded with tunnels and bunkers, and the NVA and the VC controlled the rest of the mountain. So anytime we had an operation close to that, there was usually a lot of shooting and wounding or death involved. And now he showed me pictures that that's a resort area. They've got gondolas. They're suspended from the wires. They go up to the top like a ski lift, and it's a huge water slide. It just doesn't, it's hard to comprehend, but the country hasn't changed. The political climate has changed, and I think it's good. It's just hard to realize the difference.
Do you think your life would be different if you hadn't been in the war?
Yes, most definitely. It's hard not to leave someplace like that without being affected, whether it's Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. I've met men from the Second World War, and if we would get into the conversation, the anger and the frustration that they still feel after over 60 years is the same what I feel. That the loss of life, and World War II was considered the just war. My parents, probably your grandparents, saved the world, as they said, and they did. But the soldiers still suffer.
Did you receive any special medals or service awards?
I received a number. Okay, starting over here, that's the Silver Star, which was for valor. I received that for my performance of what I did on November 4th and 5th. Behind it, below it, is the Purple Heart for wounds. In the center, the badge on the top is known as a Combat Medical Badge, and it's only awarded to medics who serve in combat. The next one down is the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with the Silver Star device, which was issued to me from the Vietnamese government for the same thing as the Silver Star I had done. Next row, the green one was the Army Commendation Medal, and that was just a meritorious award for doing a good job for 9 months in the field. And below that is a Good Conduct Medal. They let me get away with whatever I wanted to do. Medics were treated very differently over there. We were treated very special. And other guys would be drunk like I would, they would get into trouble. They would they wouldn't do anything to me. I don't know if that wasn't right, but that's how it was. But of all the awards there, and it may seem strange to some people, but even though it was a very minor one, it's the Purple Heart, because I have an uncle, or had an uncle, I'm sure he's dead now, was missing in action from the Second World War. And I can remember growing up and going by my grandmother's house, and on the wall was a picture of my Uncle Jeff with his citation. He was in the Army Air Corps with his Purple Heart. He was never found. And I mean, he was declared dead in 1943 before I was even born. But they never found him. And to me, that was my relationship to my uncle. My bonding with him. That's awards from the 196th Light Infantry Brigade. Army Commendation Medal that I received when I was leaving country. And this was given to me by the 25th Division because we were under command of them at the moment. It was for my Silver Star.
Silver Star, date of action 4th and 5th of November 1966, Republic of Vietnam. For gallantry in action, Private First Class O'Brien distinguished himself for heroic actions in the Republic of Vietnam. Private O'Brien was serving as a medic with the 1st Platoon of Company D, 2nd Battalion, 1st Infantry. During the evening of 4 November and the morning of 5 November 1966, when his platoon was subject to heavy automatic weapons and mortar fire, many casualties were inflicted by the enemy, and Private O'Brien received a fragment wound in the right eye. Disregarding his own wounds, Private O'Brien treated the other wounded and directed their evacuation after administering aid to his own unit. Private O'Brien proceeded to aid an adjacent unit which had sustained heavy casualties. As he made his way under heavy barrage of enemy fire, it appeared that he would be unable to reach the adjacent unit, but his momentous perseverance and devotion to duty meant more to him than his own safety. Upon reaching the stranded unit, he administered aid to his wounded throughout the night. Private O'Brien made solo trips and back and forth between units to treat the other wounded personnel and directed their evacuation. Private O'Brien's conspicuous gallantry and devotion to his duty reflect great credit upon himself and his unit and the United States Army.
See, on October 31st, 1966, we woke up at sunup just like every other day in Vietnam. We had been out in the field about 4 weeks. Now, living in the field was becoming the norm instead of the exception. Shortly after the Mad Minute, Lieutenant Mills was called to the company CP for orders for our daily assignment. When he returned, all were happy. For a change, we had an easy duty. Today we were going to secure the battalion base camp, and A Company and C Company would have the search and destroy mission. We started to pick up our gear for the move to our new location for the day. I remember Sergeant Fittings put water in a steel pot. He said later he was going to heat the water and get a clean shave for a change. We hadn't been moving more than 15 minutes when the jungle exploded with small arms fire and the booms of larger explosions. They sounded like claymore mines going off. That is when I heard the first cry of medic. It was coming from the rear of the column to my right. When I found the wounded man, it was Tom Ricci's. Something had hit him in the side of his face right at the temple. It hadn't penetrated into his skull, but a small wound shaped like the letter T. As I was finishing bandaging him, there was a call medic from the front of the platoon. Tom just said to go ahead, he could make it back to the LZ. And I left to see what was going on in front. As I made my way, I heard someone say that it was Platoon Sergeant Hunt that was hit, and someone else said that if he died, so would I. 35 years later, I realized he was more afraid of what was going on than I was, but at the time I was more afraid of them than the VC. As I reached the front of the platoon, I saw David Gregory. He was Platoon Sergeant Hunt's radio operator. He was dead. Laying in the middle of the trail, I think it was about 2 or 3 feet from him, was Sergeant Hunt. As I looked over him, I was trying to figure out where to start. He had a hole in his neck 2 inches by 1. His jaw was broken and he was having very labored breathing. I decided to start on the jaw, applying the field dressing on the jaw and tying it on the top of his head to secure the jaw. Next, I applied a field dressing on the neck. Then I secured it by wrapping 2 cravats around the neck and tying them in a square knot, hopefully holding the dressing in place long enough for him to get to the aid station. Then I started an IV on him. Hopefully this would help after all the blood he had lost. I don't know where they had come from, but 2 other medics were there with a litter. They helped me get Sergeant Hunt on the litter, and we started to carry him to the LZ. Just before we reached the clearing, I noticed an entry wound in his back. I told the others we had to put him down so I could apply another dressing. When I finished, then we carried him to the waiting helicopter. As I returned to the platoon, it started to sink in what would happen to me if he didn't make it. I guess it was a good that right away there was another call for medic. I went over to the next platoon to see if I could help. I don't know who the man was, but he was also dead. I think when the firefight started, he had turned to warn the others around him, and he was hit in the back by a Claymore mine. As we started to pick him up and put him on a litter, my hands slid inside his body. He had no back left. I just couldn't do it. Some officer said something to me about being an unfit soldier. I don't know where he came from, but someone just pushed me aside and picked him up for me. The rest of the day was pretty much a blur until after dark. I heard Sergeant Hunt was still alive and hanging in there. That's all I can read.
Do you have any final thoughts? Anything I didn't ask?
Oh, that's a tough one. I really can't think of anything in particular. Just that I'm glad I made it here. That's about all I have to say.